Thank you, Kimmy. That was magnificent, wonderful. What a wonderful piece. Beautiful. So well done. The miracles of Jesus. That's my topic for this morning. Jesus performed many miracles, of course, while he was here on earth. And let me give you a definition of the word miracle, because that's a good place to start, I think. The word miracle is defined by Webster in his dictionary as follows. He says that a miracle is an extraordinary occurrence that surpasses all known human powers or natural forces and is ascribed, he says, to a divine or supernatural cause, especially to God. I like that so much, especially to God. Now that's an old Webster's dictionary that I've got. I wonder if today's modern dictionary talks about God. I don't know. I haven't looked it up. I haven't come across that. But I'm skeptic that today's modern dictionaries in this secular world that we inhabit talks much about God. The government's trying to move away from it. Our government. They don't want to talk about "in God we trust." I don't want to get off on that, but it would be so easy, wouldn't it? Be so easy. It's a wonder. It's something to behold. Let me say it that way. We see miracles even today. We see sick people become well. You haven't been close to this, I know, but Jeff Jallis, the fellow that I've been talking about so many Sundays, is a miracle. They didn't think he would make it. He had a brain bleed. He had pressure on the brain. They had pretty well given up hope on him. But today he's functioning pretty well. Not totally, but 90x%. Remarkable. He's still in the hospital, been there a long time. I read about this morning in the paper about a fellow that was in the hospital for 10 months. Long, long time. Those are miracles, and those things happen, aren't they? Sick people do become well. We see sometimes, some of us watch NASCAR. All you ladies I know follow that pretty carefully. And we see these horrendous wrecks. And we see the driver get up and walk away. Why? Because of all the protective gear and everything around him, helmets and so forth. But in some of those accidents, it's a miracle that they ever can get up and walk out of there. I don't know how they do it. One of the easiest and simplest illustrations in my mind about miracles is simply birth. Birth. When you ladies give birth to children, that is a miracle. Every single one, every baby that is born is an absolute miracle to me, and I think in God's eyes. No doubt about it. You see, a miracle is an event or something like that that cannot be explained by the laws of physics that we have. Just can't be explained by it. And we are attracted to miracles. We want to see them if we can, and of course we rarely do, because they're not planned in advance. It's instantaneous usually when it happens. But it's sort of like the subject of angels. We're fascinated by angels. And in the same way, we're fascinated by miracles that happen. There was once a movie entitled The Miracle Worker. Some of you may have seen that. It was a good movie. It was a long time ago. But it was about Helen Keller, the lady who, as you know, was deaf and blind, and how Helen Keller came to be able to talk through the auspices of her teacher, a lady, I believe it was named Anne, she was named Anne Sullivan, who taught her to speak and to do a number of things with her life. Helen Keller became a very famous person through her teacher, but it was a miracle. And of course, many of us remember when miners used to get trapped down in coal mines. And if any of them came out, it was often a miracle. We don't see that much in it today because miners aren't mining anymore. In the wisdom of our government, again, they're not letting them take any coal out of the ground. Rather have them lose their jobs and go to clean energy. Again, that's easy to get off on. I don't want to do that. But today I do want to look at the miracles of Jesus Christ. It's hard to avoid that, isn't it? You see, even before the time of Jesus, God had performed a number of miracles all the way back in the beginning of the Old Testament. We know about the Exodus. We know about the 10, if you will, plagues that God sent upon the Egyptians. Every one of those was a miracle. Only God could have done that. And we know about crossing the Red Sea, and that was a miracle. How could God hold back the waters on both sides as the Israelites crossed? And then those waters engulfed the Egyptian army that was pursuing. And then how about the manna and the quail that God provided in the desert? Had to be a miracle, because otherwise they would have starved. They would have had nothing to eat out in that lone and dry desert. How about the time when David defeats Goliath in that pay-per-view matchup that only David could prevail in because God was on his side? A miracle, no doubt. The walls of Jericho. Joshua marches around with his army 7 times, blows the trumpets, and the walls come a-tumbling down. A miracle. Only God could do that. Only God would do that. Elijah and the 450 prophets of Baal. 1 on 450. Uneven odds because God was on his side. And we know what happened there. A miracle. And Elijah is later translated, goes from this life right to the next. Doesn't even die. A miracle. Only God could do that. Only one other person in the Bible, Enoch, does the same. Translated, goes from this life into the next. Doesn't die. Let's talk some more, or let's look at the miracles of Jesus Christ. That's my focus for today. I want to share with you that. And if you will, let's turn to John chapter 2. You can follow along there in your bulletin if you like, in your order of service, or in your Bible, of course. And it says this in John chapter 2, starting with verse 1. And this is where Jesus changes the water into the wine at the wedding feast. It says, on the 3rd day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. And when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. Dear woman, he says, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. And nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Now let me pause right there just for a note of explanation. I have been to Cana in Galilee. I have been to the site where they believe Jesus turned the water into wine. And they have, I'm sure not the original, but replicas, meaning still good water jars, like the ones that are mentioned here in the Bible, 6 of them. Those water jars are about the height of my hip, your hip, right up to about here. Now imagine 30 gallons of water or wine. 30 gallons is a lot. You know, when you go to the grocery and pick up a 1-gallon container of whatever it might be, milk or anything else, that's pretty heavy, isn't it? Pretty heavy. So you put 30 of those gallons into one jar about that height, you've got a lot of liquid in there, a lot of water in this case. So think about that as we go on and read through the rest of the story here. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw out some and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside, and he said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine, after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best until now." This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. May God bless the reading and the hearing of his holy and sacred word this morning. Let me share a couple of other insights into this story because it's such a magnificent story. This is the first miracle that Jesus performed, the very first. I often use this at weddings. It fits right in with weddings because it's about a wedding. And it's a nice entree into the wedding itself, I think. But look what it says here. If you go down to around verse 10, and the banquet master, the master of the banquet as he's called, says, everyone else brings out the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. In other words, they won't know the difference. They won't know the difference. They will have imbibed so much they'll think anything is good at this point. But you didn't do that. And of course, what he's referring to is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ didn't do that. Jesus brought out the best wine. Why? Because everything Jesus does is the best. Everything, doesn't matter. He doesn't go for the cheap anything, whether it's wine or whatever. But you have saved the best until now. Look at how Jesus performs this miracle. And the second thing I want to point out is the very last verse, verse 11. It says this is the first of his miraculous signs, of course. But then look at the last sentence there. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Notice this, because this is important. It says that now Jesus has come out. This is the beginning of his ministry. Jesus is now proclaiming himself through this miracle, saying, I am, because I am. I am the eternal living God. I am here with you. I am Emmanuel. Come forth. And look what the rest of it says. And then it says his disciples now put their faith in him. In other words, they were probably a little skeptic up till now. Why? He had called them and said, come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. But now they have seen him in action. They have seen him perform. One of the miracles, one of the many miracles that he will do during the course of his ministry. And so now there's no lack of confidence in him, their leader. They now recognize and acknowledge that Jesus Christ is who he said he was, the Messiah. The Messiah. Wonderful story. Jesus changing the water into the wine. Beautiful story. Let's go back and look at some of the other miracles that Jesus performed during his time here on earth. You see, again, we've said that other people perform miracles before his time. Other people like Elisha, and even after his time, Peter and Paul performed miracles in the book of Acts. We see those. God gave them the power, the holy power to do those things, to perform miracles. But Jesus performed every single one under his own authority and under his own power. Why? To prove his deity. To prove his deity. That was the major factor in proving that. You remember back in Matthew 28 where Jesus says this. Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. All authority. I can do everything, anything, because why? God the Father has given me that authority. And that's why I can perform miracles. That's why I can raise the dead. That's why I can heal the sick, the lame, the deaf, the blind. Why? All authority has been given me from God the Father. That's what it's all about. But you see, Jesus, even though he could do these wonderful acts, these miracles, he was still very selective in what he did. Very selective. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, he did not perform miracles just for the sake of performing miracles. You remember when he was tempted in the wilderness, Satan tempted him. Because why? He'd been out there 40 days and 40 nights. He was exhausted, no doubt. Been tempted with everything that was possible. And it tells us in Luke 4 that the devil said to him, he says, if you are the Son of God, he says, if you are truly the Son of God, then tell these stones to become bread. I know you're hungry. Tell these stones to become bread. Then you can have something to eat. And look how Jesus responds to him. Jesus said this. He said, man does not live on bread alone. In other words, I have an inner strength and inner resourcefulness. I have inner power and an inner peace that comes from God alone. And you don't understand that, Satan. You just don't get that. Jesus, you see, was really referring back to Deuteronomy 6, where it says, do not put the Lord your God to the test. Don't do that. Not a good thing. That's what he was really saying to Satan. Man does not live by bread alone. I don't need the bread, Satan. I don't need to throw myself down from this pinnacle, from this high rock. I don't need to do that. I don't need to prove anything to you, Satan. Not to you. Satan was not the only one to tempt or to try to see the miracles of Jesus Christ. Let me put it that way. There was a fellow by the name of Herod Antipas, who was the son of Herod the Great. Herod the Great was the one that, of course, tried to kill Jesus when Jesus was only a baby. Herod Antipas. And, of course, in the course of the trial that Jesus goes through as he's preparing for his time on the cross, he's sent to this man, Herod Antipas. And the scriptures tell us this. It says, when Herod saw Jesus, he was greatly pleased. Because for a long time, it says, he had been waiting to see him. From what he had heard about Jesus, he hoped to see him perform some miracle. You see, what Herod Antipas, the only reason he was looking forward to seeing Jesus was he wanted to see him do one of these miraculous things. Jesus, what can you do for me? Let me see what you can do. Jesus wasn't going to honor that, of course. Wasn't going to bow down before Herod Antipas or to satisfy him. Jesus had a wide range, a wide scope of miracles over nature, over sickness, over disease, over virtually everything on earth, everything that's here. He could perform miracles. Let me give you some of the nature miracles. After he had been ministering and healing near the Sea of Galilee on one occasion, it says this in Matthew 8:26. He sent the disciples ahead of him. He said, I'm tired, I'm going to stay here. You go ahead of me, you go across on the lake, and I'll be along later on. And as they were going across the sea, we all know the story, the wind and the waves got up, and they became very treacherous. And the disciples, who many of were fishermen, were afraid of capsizing, of overturning, of being thrown out of the boat. They were very sore afraid, as it says. And Jesus, who then later was in the boat, got up and rebuked the waves. He says, be still, I command you. Be still. He had authority over even the wind and the waves, over all of nature. Only Jesus could do that. He did that on several occasions. That was just one. And then later on, after he had fed the 5,000, the miraculous feeding of the 5,000 men, plus the women and children, which probably amounted to well over 10,000 total, which was a miracle in itself. Think about that. Multiplying the loaves and the fishes, the 5 loaves of bread, the 2 fishes. That was a miracle. After he got finished that, again he was tired, so he went up on the mountain. And the same thing, he said to his disciples, you go ahead of me. I'm going to go up on the mountain and pray, and I'll be all right. You go ahead, and I'll catch up with you later on. And it says, during the 4th watch of the night, when again the wind and the waves got up, and they can really get up on the Sea of Galilee, I can promise you. After that happened, Jesus went out to them, this time walking on the water to get to the boat. Look, there's a man walking on the water, the song says. Beautiful song. Jesus Christ, only Jesus could do that. That's a miracle in itself. And again, he quiets the wind and the waves, rebukes them, calms them, settles them down. Or think about the time when the Pharisees kind of accosted him, and they said to him and Peter, and they said, don't you or your disciples pay the temple tax? You know, there's a temple tax involved with worshiping at the temple. We haven't seen you pay that tax. Why not? The temple tax was 2 drachmas, 2 days' wages, basically, per year. And so Jesus says to Peter, he says, I'll tell you what. He says, you go out to the Sea of Galilee, or not Galilee, go out to this lake that's nearby. He says, and throw out your line. Throw out your line. He says, and take the first fish that you catch and open its mouth and see what you find. He says, there will be 4 drachmas in that fish's mouth when you do it. Go ahead and use that to pay the temple tax. Quiet these Pharisees who are so loud and boisterous and vociferous about not paying the temple tax. That's a miracle. Who else could do that? Only God, only Jesus could do that. Go out and catch a fish, and there you will find a 4 drachma coin right there in its mouth. You remember after his resurrection, Jesus was up by the Sea of Galilee, and he was on the shore, and his disciples were out in the boat. A lot of boats take place in the New Testament. A lot of fishing goes on because of the disciples and because of catching of men. And they're out there all night, and they can't catch any fish. And Jesus is standing on the shore, and they don't recognize him. Why? Because maybe it's foggy, maybe Jesus elects not to be recognized, or other reasons. And he shouts to them, he says, how are you doing out there? Did you catch any fish? No, we didn't catch any fish. Sad story, comes back. Throw your net, he says, over on the right side of the boat. Get it away from the left. Throw it on the right side and see what happens. And they do that. And they have a terrific haul of fish, 153 large fish, the scriptures say. Then they recognize him. They realize it's the Christ standing there on the shore. He says, come over and have some breakfast with me. He's already there preparing breakfast, cooking fish, by the way. Come and have breakfast. And then they knew it was him. They knew it was Jesus. He has authority over demons, deacons too, yes. I want to be sure everybody's awake. Everybody's awake. Deacons and demons. There's no correlation, okay? No, just wanted to make sure everybody was with me on this. He has authority over demons. And he cures a number of people who are possessed by demons back in those days. Mark 5, chapter 5, verses 12 and 13. After this man who is living in the area of the tombs, why he's an outcast. He's riddled with demons. He's got demons all throughout his body. And he's a big, strong, boisterous guy, and you don't dare get near him. The people shun him. He's an outcast. They're afraid of him, and they should be. And when Jesus approaches him, and the demons come out, of him. They say, the demons beg Jesus, it says, send us down among those pigs. You see those swine, those pigs down there feeding in the grass? We want to go into them. You're casting us out of this man, but we want to go into them. We don't understand that. There's no way of explanation for that. But demons, for some reason, want to be in either humans or in animals. I've mentioned that before. So it says he gave them permission, and they went down into the pigs. And the herd was about 2,000 in number, it says, rushed headlong down the bank into the water, destroying themselves. A miracle. Jesus casts out demons. Casts out demons from Mary Magdalene. 7 demons were in her. He cast them out from her. There are 21 miracles in the Gospel of Matthew alone that Jesus performs. Over 35 in the whole New Testament. Jesus heals and restores the blind, the deaf, the mute. So many places. Another man who was demon-possessed says this, Matthew 9, verse 32. It says, a man who was demon-possessed and could not talk was brought to Jesus. And when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke. The crowd was amazed and said, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. And indeed it never had. Or the faith of the Canaanite woman, we're told about her. It says Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon, that's up on the coast near Haifa. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession. Jesus questions her at length because she's a Gentile, and of course, at this point in his ministry, he's still ministering predominantly to the Jews. And he finds that she has great faith. And when he realizes that, recognizes that, which he did all along, of course, he says, woman, you have great faith, and therefore your request is granted. After the transfiguration, listen to this. After the transfiguration, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he says, for he has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or the water. Jesus heals the son, casts out the demon. And then the disciples come to Jesus and they say, Lord, why is it? You could heal that boy, but we couldn't. We tried. Before you got here, we tried. That man approached us, but we couldn't do it. And Jesus says, because you have too little faith. You're not ready yet. I'm still teaching you. You're still growing because you have too little faith. It's kind of what he says to us. We will never be adequate in the eyes of Jesus until we give ourselves totally to him. Give ourselves totally, completely, and fully to him. That's the only way. And this is the last one that I'll use as an illustration, but after Jesus calls his first disciples, it says in Mark 1, chapter 1, it says, there was a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit. And he cries out when Jesus comes into the synagogue and he sees him. The demon cries out from within, what do you want with us, Jesus, Son of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us, meaning us, the demons? I know who you are, he says. You are the Holy One of God. Be quiet, Jesus said sternly. Come out of him. And the evil spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. Only Jesus could perform these miracles. Jesus did so many more miracles over sickness, disease, over death. Obviously not enough time to go through all of those today. I want to close by sharing with you a miracle that we witnessed yesterday. I can't believe this, and you won't. None of us can understand it. But we were coming back. I mentioned that we had gone to North Carolina to the Outer Banks for a few days with our family. And we were coming back on I-95, and we had been driving about 4.5 hours or so. And we were approaching our home. We were about, I guess, less than 3 miles away from our home. And the traffic was very heavy, as you know it often is on I-95. And as we were going along all this heavy volume of traffic, all of a sudden, people started braking in front of us. And we were over in the right-hand lane. There was a car over in the far left lane that apparently wasn't paying attention or whatever the case may be. And when he saw people braking so abruptly, he couldn't stop in time. He realized that, so he veered to the left, which was over to the shoulder of the highway, of course. There was no guardrail there. And so he went over on the shoulder and he went straight down a bank, a steep bank, very steep bank. And then miraculously, he righted that vehicle. It never turned over. But somehow he got it going straight forward again, just like the flow of traffic, and brought it to a halt. Never turned over. Should have, by every count, by every means, by everything. We both witnessed that. No telling how the good Lord ever looked out for him, but the Lord did. Miracle. Absolute miracle. I don't know any reason that happened except to share that with you today. I'm sure he didn't plan it that way. I'm sure a lot of things, but that was an absolute miracle. We didn't stop. We were too far ahead of him, and there was plenty of other people coming along who would have taken care of them. We know that. But anyway, a miracle. God still works miracles today. Amen. Amen. Still does. If anyone here would like to come and give your heart and soul and life to Jesus Christ today, if you wish to come and share with him and make him in charge of your life, if you wish to rededicate your life, if you wish to transfer your letter of membership, or if you just want to come and pray at the altar or speak to me, whatever it might be, I'll be standing here in front. We're going to stand and sing a hymn, a wonderful hymn of invitation. Will you stand with me, please?